Hey friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Annette, Sunbeam Fabric Art. Today I want to show you how I made a couple of giant sized blocks. Let me show you these blocks and talk a little bit about what I'm going to do with them. So today I wanted to show you how I made these giant blocks. I made two of them and they are different. I have not decided yet what I'm going to do with these two giant blocks. They are pretty large, and let's get the tape measure and measure these. So I just measured these with my handy dandy tape measure here. We're looking at about 21.5 inches going this way and about 16.5 inches going this way. So very large blocks. So my initial idea was to make a giant quilt out of these giant blocks, because seeing that they're 21.5 inches wide, it would only take probably 3 by 4, maybe 12 of these giant blocks to make a good size lap quilt. When I finished the first two, now I'm thinking I want to make pet beds out of them. So I may be making 2 pet beds out of these 2 giant blocks. So come along and I'll show you what I did. And as I do in a lot of my projects, I'm using 8.5 by 11 newsprint paper. I'll put a link in my description to this paper. I'll also put a link to this quilt top that I made recently using the 8.5 by 11 and strips. All these strips are going the same direction, as you can see. For this project, I did not want all the strips going the same way. I wanted to have a large diamond type shape. So I am using my ruler to draw a diagonal line across this 8.5 by 11 strip from one corner to the opposite corner. As you can see here, if I draw all the diagonal lines the same way, I'm going to end up with the exact same quilt that I already did, where all the stripes are going the same way. To solve this problem and get the diamond shape I want, I had to draw the diagonal line going the opposite corner to the opposite corner, almost like making an X on the paper. So half of my foundation pieces have half of the X, the other half of my foundation pieces have the other half of the X. I went to my stash and pulled out leftover strips, wide, skinny. I had some 2.5 inch strips left over from binding cuts and from jelly rolls that I still had a couple of pieces left. My first step for this block was to take a light strip and a dark strip, and I put them right sides together. And here you can see I took a minute to mark which side of that line was going to be lights and which side was going to be darks, so that my diamonds would look cohesive. It would probably be easier to mark these light and dark while they're all laid out on a table in a diamond pattern. For the very first stitch line that I sewed on these blocks, I sewed with the paper on top so I could see the line, because I wanted that stitch line to go right down the center of that diagonal line that I had drawn. So I made sure and laid my paper on top of my 2 pieces of strip, and then I held that up so I could see that my stitch line was going to overlap the edge of the fabric. And a reminder, if you're sewing on paper, use a stitch length of 1.8 or less. Once the initial seam is sewn, I then began sewing fabric to fabric, right sides together, strip to strip. I pressed flat after every strip was added. So here I am chain piecing the initial 2 strips, right sides together, one light and one dark, making sure that the light and the dark are on the right sides. So I pressed my strips open and then I started adding more strips, and I sewed 2 light strips and 2 dark strips on each side, and then I switched and added dark on the light side and light on the dark side. To save yourself just a little bit of time, sew a strip to one side, sew another strip to the other side, and then press open. And here you can see I'm almost to the end. I just need a little tiny bit of fabric to cover this little triangle, and on the other side I have covered it, so I don't need anything. Now I am trimming these blocks down to 8.5 by 11 inches each. Once I had all those trimmed, I went through that pile of trimmings and I salvaged anything that I thought was big enough to add to my crumb pile. Once that was done, I removed the paper from my blocks. Now I want to give you a tip. When you're working with this kind of block with diagonal strips, you are going to want to be very careful when you're joining the blocks together. These blocks can be very stretchy. You'll want to use pins and clips when you're joining them together so they don't get out of shape and stretch where you don't want them to stretch. I laid out 4 of these blocks into the diamond shape that I wanted to make. To complete my diamond, I'm going to sew the top 2 rectangles to each other, then I'm going to sew the bottom 2 rectangles together, and then I am going to sew the top row to the bottom row to complete my diamond. So here you can see I have sewn these rectangles to each other. Now I just need to fold over the top 2 onto the bottom 2, and I need to do something called nesting seams to match up that center seam. To nest that center seam, I fold it over, I match up that center seam, I make sure one seam is going one way, one seam is going the other way, and then those will catch and lock together, and then I can put a clip on that and hold it in place until I can get to the sewing machine. And you'll notice that I use a lot of clips here to keep that fabric from stretching, because we are cutting these on diagonal lines, and then we cut again and make another diagonal line. It makes it very stretchy. I'll be right back after I stitch these seams and press these blocks open. Thanks for joining me today. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit that subscribe button. You can like the video and hit the bell icon. You'll get notified when I post new content. I do really like the way these blocks turned out, and I will certainly keep you posted of what I decide to do with them in the future.